Hello and welcome. This is Angie with CountryChicCottage.net here today with another new offering from Cricut. Today we're going to talk about the brand new scoring wheel for the Cricut Maker. So if you have the Cricut Maker and do paper crafts or even some other crafts that you might be interested in, the scoring wheel might just be for you. And we're going to learn all about this. If you're familiar with Cricut at all, you may have used the Scoring Stylus. This, yes, can replace it, but you might want both. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between the two and some of the tests that I've ran.
First, let's talk about what scoring is. If I was to try to fold this piece of paper where there was not any score lines, I might have trouble getting my fold straight and even, and I would also have trouble getting a clean fold. And on this particular material, a clean fold that didn't crack the material, since this is a foil-based material. Now, a score line is a line that does not cut the paper. It just creases it, and it makes it easier to fold, get that perfect straight line, perfect crease, and in this case, with less of the cracking of the foil material. Now let's talk about a little bit about what the scoring wheel itself is. The scoring wheel has the adaptive tool system specifically for the Cricut Maker. It comes with one housing and two wheels. Now on the wheels themselves, you will find an O1 or an O2 engraved in the side. The O1 indicates the single scoring wheel. The O2 indicates the double wheel. Now, there is a quick change tool system that will allow you to change the two wheels easily. You just press the plunger on the top, pull off one wheel, and add the second one on. Now, it will only go one way. It will not allow you to put it on the wrong way. Now, when you input your material into Cricut Design Space, it will tell you whether to use the O1 or the O2 wheel. However, it is only checking that you have a scoring wheel in place. In other words, you could have the O2 wheel in place when Cricut Design Space recommends the O1. I always recommend using the wheel that Cricut Design Space recommends for you. Those are based on testing and will give you the best results. Now, you might also be familiar with a scoring stylus. The scoring stylus was what was used in your Cricut machine to score material before the Cricut Maker and the scoring wheel. When you do your project in Cricut Design Space, it will tell you to insert the scoring wheel into this location. So you just remove any blade that you might have in place, insert the scoring wheel into the adaptive tool system, and close the clamp. Now it's ready to score. What will happen is the Maker will score the material first, the machine will stop, your computer will prompt you to change out the wheel in place of the blade, then the cutting will begin. Now, what if you do not have the scoring wheel and you still want to score and use the stylus instead? Just click Edit Tools in Cricut Design Space and tell it you want to use the scoring stylus instead. So in this case, just as you always have, you will open up this secondary holder, press in the scoring stylus, and close the clamp. And now you can use your stylus just like you always have and put your blade into this location. And with the stylus, it'll actually score first, then cut without stopping the machine in between. Now, I've done a bunch of comparisons between the stylus and the wheel, so let's jump into those and see exactly what the differences are.
So let's talk about those tests just a minute. So I cut just rectangle pieces from various materials, and I scored two lines down the pieces. I cut one by using the scoring wheel, and the other by using the scoring stylus. And then I folded each one. I folded each one both toward the score line as well as away from the score line. So I could get a comparison of the differences as far as which way you folded each material and how much cracking was present on some of the material types. So let's dive into some of the experiments. I wanted to start easy. Plain paper, construction paper, copy paper, regular cardstock, even some corrugated cardstock. So how did the Cricut perform on all these materials? I will say that for simple materials like these, so think thin materials that are fairly simple and don't have any embellished finishes on them, the scoring wheel and the scoring stylus were about equal when compared between the two. So if you are going to work exclusively with these type of materials, the scoring stylus might be for you. Now, maybe you want to deep dive into some different materials. Let's talk about those. So the next set of experiments I ran were on specialty materials. So things like embossed foil paper, shimmer paper, sparkle paper, foil poster board, as well as glitter paper. So on these materials, folding them is a bit tougher. Number one, finding the score lines on some of these can be really difficult, especially the glitter paper. I found it really difficult with the stylus to even find the lines I needed to fold on. But with the wheel, it was much, much easier. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you want to play with glitter paper. On some of these shimmered and foil papers, especially the foil paper, the cracking problem is extreme. So if you are working with these and want to fold them, it is really hard to do with the stylus and get a clean fold that doesn't crack. In other words, that doesn't crack along the fold and you can see that core stock underneath. So I would definitely say if you want to work with specialty materials, the wheel is going to be for you. Now, what do I mean by cracking? Let's look a little closer.
The double scoring wheel is especially beneficial on special materials like this foil piece. As you can see, I've used my double scoring wheel and made a couple of score lines on this piece. Now, it is recommended that you fold the score lines, especially on specialty material, towards your score line, which would mean I would need to score on the back side of my paper to get a clean fold here that did not crack. So that means you need to put the shiny side down on your mat and score on the back of the paper. Now, what happens if you score on this side and bend your paper away from the fold? Well, you get quite a bit of cracking, if you can see that, and not as clean of a fold. So you definitely want to go toward your folds. So when you're making a project, think about the final piece and how you want your folds to be, and either put it shiny side down on the mat or back side down on the mat, depending on the piece you're creating.
Alright, and at the beginning of this video, we talked a little bit about how there's an O1 wheel, an O2 wheel, and then we have the stylus. So I thought one of my experiments should be to use both. We talked a little bit about how the Maker does not check to see if you have the 1 or 2 wheel, so it's fairly easy to compare them. And I just did it on some craft board and compared the two. You can definitely see on the craft board the difference between the O1 wheel and the O2 wheel. So if you want to do this experiment yourself, it's fairly easy to do. I will say that all of these on craft board folded fairly easily, but definitely the O2 wheel makes folding super, super simple. It has that double score line that makes the fold just perfect. But the single score wheel on this worked fine as well. And the stylus a little more difficult, but I still found it fairly easy to fold. Now what about some heavier materials and specialty materials? So I went from that craft board to a light chipboard using the stylus and just the O2 wheel this time. I found the O2 wheel easier to find my folds and easier to fold itself, but the stylus did work and worked pretty well. You might just have to take a little extra time to find the fold line and make sure you get it just perfect. Next, Cricut also said that you could fold foam, and I thought that was really interesting. So I cut some 2mm craft foam, scoring both with the wheel and the stylus. I didn't necessarily see a big difference in this. It does require or at least it asks for the O2 wheel to do the foam, and I will say it leaves, you know, that double score line. So if you were doing like some kind of project where you just wanted to emboss the foam, maybe with a square or something for a project you were working on, not necessarily to fold it, the stylus or the O1 wheel might be better for you, and that way you got a clean line instead of that double line running across your material. Now, for the big differences. First of all, acetate. So the instructions said that the scoring wheel would score acetate, and it actually recommended the O1 wheel. This is the Cricut foil acetate, and I ran it through with both the stylus and the 01 wheel. Now you might notice something about the stylus piece. It's not folded. I couldn't find the fold lines. So this is where that pressure of that wheel comes into play. So you get more pressure on the wheel portion than you would on the stylus. And I frankly can't even tell that it ran over this sheet, and I watched it run over it, so I know it did, but I could not find the fold lines at all. The wheel, however, was perfect, and I was able to fold that acetate just perfectly on those lines. So next up is cork. Now, you might notice I only have one piece to show you. That is because as the stylus works across your material, it is dragging instead of rolling like the wheel would. When this stylus drags across the cork to score it, it actually just picks it up and ruins the piece. So if you are going to add score lines to cork, I would say 100% do not use the stylus. It does not work. The wheel, however, works wonderfully. I did use the 02 wheel in this case, and I would definitely say fold it towards your score line, not away from. The cracking was really extreme in the case of cork. So towards your fold line, the 02 wheel, and you can definitely score and fold cork. So then I moved on to even harder to cut and fold materials. I went to a copper, like it's a 40 gauge copper, and yes, your Cricut Maker will cut this. And I scored it both with the 01 wheel as well as the stylus. Now, this material is extremely difficult to work with. Super thin. Think about like folding thick aluminum foil and how hard that would be to get a perfect crease. It was very difficult with both the 01 wheel and the stylus to get a perfect fold on copper. I'll just say that. I think if you were to be really careful, maybe you could. I'll say the 01 wheel a little bit better of a line to fold your piece. So maybe try it first. I did not try the 02 wheel. It called for the 01 wheel in Cricut Design Space. You might try the 02 as well and see if you could get a little bit better of a crease. But I will say be very, very patient if you're working with copper and want a fold. Now I wanted to go a little bit outside of the box and score some balsa wood. So yes, the Cricut Maker will cut balsa wood. I used my knife blade to cut these pieces. And balsa wood, if you have not worked with it before, is very, very soft and lightweight. And I thought this scoring wheel and the stylus will definitely score it, and it absolutely does. So you can definitely put lines within balsa wood and basswood. Now, I tried to bend it to see what would happen, and it will break eventually. So you can bend it some, but if you bend it too much, it will just break into a couple different pieces. So be cautious with that. But if you just wanted to emboss it for a little accent in your craft project, I think you could definitely do that. The stylus, I used the stylus and the 01 wheel. The stylus gave a cleaner emboss in this case, just because the wheel kind of left marks on both sides, where the sides of the wheel were actually embedding into the balsa. So you might try the stylus instead in that case. Alright, so a few tips, tricks, recommendations for the scoring wheel, stylus, so however you score. So right now, you can only use the scoring wheel with the default setting. So where it says more or less pressure does not affect scoring at all. So there's no reason to try to play with those numbers. It's just the default setting. We talked about it before. You can, of course, click Edit Tools, change from the scoring wheel to the stylus. Again, the Maker itself does not know the difference between the 01 and the 02 wheel, so you can kind of put whichever one you want in there, but I definitely stick with the recommendation, at least the first pass. If you're not happy with it, you might try the alternate. And I know I might get some questions, so the scoring wheel does not have to be calibrated. So if you were here for the knife blade video, you will know that the knife blade needed to be calibrated when you bought it for your Cricut Maker. The scoring wheel does not, so you don't have to do that step at all when you get it new. And the other question I think you might have is if fast mode is available, and you can only use fast mode when cutting or writing, so it is not available for scoring. And then we talked a little bit about the mat itself and some of these specialty papers, putting them shiny side down when you're scoring to get the best folds. Now, what mat do you use? Use the mat that is recommended for the material type you're using. and it will score fine. So you don't have to have a particular mat in order to use the scoring wheel or the scoring stylus. Alright, so that's it for that scoring wheel. I hope this answered all your questions. Now, my recommendation, if you don't have either one, I would get the scoring wheel. I would definitely go ahead and invest that extra, and that way you are ready when you want to play with these specialty materials like foil and shimmer and glitter paper. You'll be ready to play with those when the time comes. Now, if you already have the scoring stylus, I would just use it until you find a situation where you're like, I'm just not getting clean folds. If you are working with that foil paper, just stop. Go ahead and order the scoring wheel. Don't even try to get those clean folds on it without the wheel. But if you're just working with cardstock or copy paper or things like that, I think you might definitely get the results you're looking for with the stylus. But if you find yourself frustrated, you just can't get a perfect score line, you just can't find your folds, you just can't get those perfect folds across there, go ahead and invest in the wheel. I think you will be happy. I think you'll find it much easier for your scoring projects. So if you're an avid paper crafter, do lots of scoring, go ahead and pick up the scoring wheel today. I think you'll definitely enjoy the experience and getting those perfect folds every time, even on the specialty papers. So thank you all so much for joining me today. Be sure to give us a thumbs up on YouTube, share with your friends, subscribe for even more Cricut fun. We try to always do these videos when Cricut comes out with a new machine or tool, so it gives you the lowdown on how it compares with what's already out there, or it gives you the lowdown on what's new and what the new tool can do. So thank you all so much for joining me today. Until next time.